All right, we're starting, bud. I know there's all right, let's get rocking, bud. Make sure we catch the front. You ready? Let's rock. Hey guys, welcome to this month's live event. I'm Tommy Creal, contributing editor with My Hog, as many of you may know. Today we're going to be walking through this 2010 Sportster. This is mostly a demonstration for you guys to get a feel for how to properly remove a lot of these components, and we're going to get to reinstalling the major components. Might not get around to getting some of the paint and the tins on, but that's pretty self-explanatory, and I'll touch a quick bit on that as we go along here. So this is a 2010 Sportster, like I said. This is something that we did a few upgrades with the crash bar, blacked it out in many different ways, added sissy bar seat, blah blah blah. So we're going to be, there might be a few things that are different than maybe your stock setup, but we'll touch on those components as well. Before we get rolling on this guy, I want to mention, check out the chat box that you should see right there on the live event page. And if you got any questions as we go along, want to know how to do something or why I did it, make sure you just plug it right in there. I'll make sure to address it as best I can. And then also right below that, you'll see that there's a free downloadable video for Harley air codes. Make sure you check that out, and you can't beat free. So check that out. And lastly, as we go through, I'm going to reference a few points on here, like rebuilding front ends, addressing handlebars, bushings, triple trees, and there's more depth videos on fixmyhog.com that you can check out as well, and get a full view of all that. So without further more, let's get rocking and rolling and ripping through some tools here. So first thing, in any kind of project that we're doing, the reason I'm standing back here is that I want to prep the whole area that we're going to be working on. So you can obviously see I started by putting some kind of protection over the gas tank. We're going to remove the seat and disconnect the battery because we're going to be working with some electrical components on our handlebars and controls, including turn signals, headlights, and you always want to make sure that you're disconnecting that battery. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rolling and start taking the seat off and get moving from there. So this is a simple seat. I already cracked this bolt back here. I cheated a little bit for you guys so we can get the most of this live event. I'll pull this out, remove the seat, and with any of these bolts, just keep it right where you took it out of, taking it out of, and that'll help you track them down as well along the way. If I can find the hole. All right. And this Sportster, battery's on this side. What we're going to do is just pull the main fuse. She comes out for us. And I'm going to walk around so you guys, so I can actually get this without damaging stuff in here. All right, so we're going to pull the main fuse. And we are good to go. All right, are we on this front end now? Are we zooming in on this sucker? All right, so as you can see with this Sportster, we have a few little extra additions on here. We have this detachable, quick release front windshield. We're just gonna pop that off to start with. And look at this, all the tools are already laid out. So we're gonna pull both these off. I always like to crack all the bolts loose to begin with, and then we can fully take them out. And take your time as you're going through this. There's obviously not a rush to get it done. All right. The reason why we're taking these off first is I want to remove anything that has potential of getting scratched or dinged up that's going to be in our way. So right after this, we'll make our way over to the front fender, and then just work our way from the top down from there. Or if you choose, you can actually do it the opposite way. You can go from the front up, but we are going to go through some of those pinch bolts on here that make a big difference in making sure nothing's binding in your front end. These are pretty neat setups if you like windshields and a fan of those. These are a nice little setup for that. Come on. All right. So now we got all 4 of these done. We're going to remove them like so. That's the one that I want to be careful of. Place this to the side. And these are shoulder bolts, spacers in here. So keep an eye on those. There's going to be 2 different sizes as well, since we're on it. There's going to be 2 different sizes on these little guys. So make sure you're putting them in the correct area. The larger one's going to be on the bottom, and the smaller one's going to be on the top in this application. I'm going to put these bolts, lay them all out. All we're going to do is we're going to pull the outside off. This bike's been ridden quite a bit, so might have some resistance, which we do. I don't really... The safest way to remove chrome on any kind of area on the bike, obviously not putting any kind of tool in there and trying to pry it off, just wiggling it back and forth and front and back, and that'll usually crack whatever that maybe adhesive rust, Loctite that made its way down, and that'll work through. Apparently this one doesn't just want to come through. That's close enough. So what we're going to do, I don't want to waste time on getting those. When we slide the forks out, we're just going to slide these right through now that they're loose. As you can see, we loosen those all up. All right, now that we have the windshield off, we've got access to this entire area. The last piece I'm going to take off is the fender. Much easier when we get all these tools laid out. Much, much easier. Again, so when I can already feel resistance on this bolt coming out, what we're going to do when we reinstall is we're going to run a quick tap through. That's going to take any of that Loctite out of there and make sure we have a nice fit, so we're not going to be potentially cross-threading it. So pulling any kind of bolt out of the bike, take a peek and also feel for that resistance, or if it feels like a cross-threading, make sure you double check those areas on the bike as well. And obviously never use power tools. The biggest reason for that, like a cordless drill, as you see sometimes on TV shows, those guys whipping through, is because you can't feel that. If a bolt is cross-threading and you are driving that fastener in, you have to take in consideration that that tool is not going to let you know. So always use hand tools when you're doing this. It may be quicker, but to use a tool, just use your hand tools. And also, you can see I'm putting my hand right here behind the ratchet. I think most of the guys, including Zach over here, and the camera has lost some blood on their hands because of a slip wrench, but it's better than cracking into that chrome and getting a nice gouge in there and spending a couple $100 on doing that and screaming bloody murder. So getting to is take precaution, just be safe when you're working on your bike. All right. And then we're going to need the extension for the back end. Pull this one through. So I hope most of you guys are out there riding already. over here in Chicago, we just got the good weather, so now's the riding season. A lot of times when you're working on projects like this, and if you've seen any of our live events in the past, I continue to stress using 2 people. It's just going to be much easier on you and also less expensive if you make a soft mistake. So if you got a buddy laying around doing nothing, call him on over and help you out. More hands is better than none. That's, you know, all these bolts, they're pretty wicked. I can say we didn't install this front fender, so whoever did probably used monster Loctite in there. The green monster. All right, we're on to the last one. Now, since this is the last one, we're going to be trying at the same time to hold this fender. Of course, this is going to be the worst bolt. At any point, too, during reassembly on this or even disassembly, if you're putting on a completely new front end, you see blue masking tape right here hanging on here. We gob this stuff on the entire bike. Just for the reason it's much easier to peel off that than to fix a ding or a scratch. So tape it up. There's never too much tape. Stay away from duct tape though. Use a hefty residue. Man, it's getting worse as we go. So this is definitely a hole that we're gonna retap. It's almost, and it's not binding against the fender, so that tells me that those threads are pretty trashed. They've lived their life. Yeesh. All right. Thanks for hanging in there with me, guys. We're almost there. All right. Pull it through. Doesn't help with these tie downs. All right. Front fender. Looking spider web. Pop that down over there. Yeah, and even looking at this, what I'm brushing off is actual metal, so I can actually feel it. So these will be running a tap again through those. For the moment, what we're going to do is, since threads mate, we're going to put these right back where we took them out of those exact holes. So on this side right here, what I did is I laid out the bolts and pattern of where we took them out of. I'm not going to go too far into that one. That hole's pretty bad. All right. So now there's many different ways of pulling your front end apart. If you're doing a full end rebuild where it's going to be your triple trees, your fork tubes, your forks, even your front tire, risers or handlebars, you can either work your way from the top down, which would involve bringing the handlebars off, taking the headlamp off, turn signals off, and then removing your pinch bolts and forks, or you can work your way from the bottom up. Now I prefer, in this case, since we're going to be pulling it all apart, I want to get the tire off and then the fork tubes out of there, and then we can kind of work on this whole mess up here and sort that out. So with that being said, I'm going to crack this front tire loose. On this side, here's the axle nut, and on this side we have a pinch bolt. So what this pinch bolt actually does is, after that axle goes through and we have it torqued down, then we torque down that pinch bolt, which then pinches on the axle as a secondary reinforcement to make sure that that axle doesn't spin. and also back out as well. If for whatever reason we had this nut come out, then we'd be able to make sure at least we can pull over and without having to wheelie to the next exit. So I'm going to crack this one loose. What you're going to do is you're going to crack this loose while the pinch bolt is still fully tightened. That way you have more leverage and you don't need to put some type of tool right here through the handle. I'm going to pull this one out. Okay. And then on this side we're going to crack loose this pinch bolt. It's a 9/16 nut on this side. And then 5/16 bolt on this side. All right. Oh, now we're working. All right, so this is our pinch bolt that went right through. Obviously following it is a flat washer, split washer, and then a normal nut, not a nylock. So I'm going to put this back together and pull it, put it on over here. Now, if you have the ability to work on a lift and you have all the accessories, blackjacks, all that kind of stuff, you can see that I've set this up where our tie downs aren't on our triple trees because those will be coming off. So what we did is we put it right off the crash bar right here, pulled it down, and then put 2 flat jacks. So the reason is I want to lift the bike up now, and that way we can pull that front tire out through the front vise and have the ability to still work on that front end. All right, so I'm going to crack this loose. Got a fatter tire in here. Now I'm just going to raise this up. If you don't have airlift blackjacks, you just put a simple jack right under this on the ground and then work with that. A little bit more. Yeah, it's scraping just a little bit on the bottom. All right. Now we have that. I'm just going to... All right, these are still nice and tight, so keep them there. So now we're going to remove the front tire. We did crack these a little bit loose, so I'm going to get a rubber mallet for this. Obviously, do not use a normal hammer. Metal on metal is never going to leave a good impression, literally. You can get some dings and scratches all the way through. So what I like to do is try to see if I can work this axle out by hand. Normally you can, if it has some anti-seize on it, put some pressure on this side and work through. Other times, if you have last resort and you just can't get it through and you have a stubborn axle, where we've had actually a rear axle that was seized in the bearings. You remember that bike? And all the way through, we actually had to heat it with oxyacetylene to get it out. So there are times where you're going to find that. But you can use an extension for a socket in here. Make sure you don't hit the threads, get right in front and push it through, which might be the case here. Or I'm just going to use a T-handle and see if I can push this one out. There we go. Now, if you're using the same fork boots and a wheel on your new setup in the front end, make sure you keep an eye on where these spacers are. A lot of times we'll mark them. So if we have more than 2 spacers, we'll put a mark on them to indicate if they're going on the right or the left side of the bike. You can also just reference your brake side and put a B right over there. So I'm going to keep an eye on these. I want to make sure these fork tubes are still secure in there. All right. What do we do with my other guy? All right. Sorry guys, I'm looking for my We had it in here. That's right. Oh, right in front of my eyes, sitting here. Make sure these are still tight because I did crack these loose. All right. All right, so now that I have the axle loose, I'm just going to keep my hand right under here. Continue to move this thing out. Man, every time I say it's loose, then it binds up. So the way they work. All right, we're going to lay that thing down. See if I can work one of these axle spacers out. Okay. And then on this airlift, we just have a simple wheel vise in front where we can pop this thing out and just pull the tire out. So it's pretty convenient and nice if you're doing quite a few repairs. All right, we're going to roll this out. And you'll see that the brake caliper is still right there. I'm going to pull that off, but I want to get all these together first. So keeping an eye on these, I'm just going to put these directly on the axle where we took them off. And then put our flat washer and nut right back on here. Makes life so much easier if you're just putting these right back into place. Instead of fishing around for a couple hours looking for them. All right, so now that we have that loose, we need to pop off that front brake caliper. This one with the ape hangers that we installed on here, we actually put a bridge right here. So we're gonna have to remove this off the bottom stem or the bottom triple tree. Allow us some slack, and then we'll pull that off. I think we can get right under here now with this. Yep. Look at that. Today's been a good day with bikes. They've been listening. All right. All right, so this is just one bolt coming through. Take your time, bring this guy out. And that's going to be, see that guy right there? Mad camera skills, look at that. Now with any kind of line, you're going to see me putting rags over here. I don't ever recommend letting lines hang, brake calipers hang off the handlebars, turn signals hang, throttle cables, or any kind of wire. And reason being is that time after time, a lot of these connectors will have wear and tear, and the older your bike is, you'll see this. But those, you have the potential of running the risk of pins pulling out, wires pulling out in places where you can't see. For instance, if we were to let this entire loom hang and there was a little heavier object on the other end, you know, they may pull out. Brake calipers, same thing. You can tweak those threads. Maybe the bolt is binding. So play it safe. If you're taking this stuff off, it's better to take it all the way off from the front line down to the bottom line. Remove it and then re-bleed your brakes and things like that. But for this application, what I'm going to do is just take these off and then just make sure that we're resting them on places where we're not going to scratch. So we're going to use a few rags here. And clear our workspace so we got some room to work. Boy, it's hot in here. It's cold. All right, so now we're going to take off the front brake caliper, crack them both loose, and then we'll pull them directly out. Keep in mind, keep a hand on this. Once you pull that first bolt out, it's going to come loose at the top. Last thing you want to do is get that nice looking rim all scratched up. All right. Okay. We have our front brake. Sometimes you'll see that there are longer bolts and shorter bolts on the front brake caliper. Could be just because of the way the boot is set up, spacing. A lot of your street glides and road glides now will have different sizes. Make sure they're going in the back, the right hole. Otherwise, what they could do is bind and actually seize up your front end. I've seen that, and same thing on swing arms. That's where I mostly have seen it. They'll actually make sure, or they'll stop the swing arm from moving. All right, as you can see, I let the brake caliper go right down the lift. There's no tension coming up, so I'm comfortable with leaving it right there. And then we're just going to pull out this front tire. Jeez, that thing is beefy. All right, now we're making progress. We're moving on this one. Grab something to drink. Next step in the removal of your front end, what we're going to do is we're going to take off the fork tubes. These are all one piece. We're going to take off we're going to loosen the pinch bolt here, and then we're going to loosen this pinch bolt. What I recommend is just leaving them in there. So crack them loose, take a couple spins, 1 or 2 full turns, and that'll give you enough room for that thing to come out. Now, keep in mind, a lot of times with some of these upgrades on the bike, and even with stock setups, that there's going to be additional components on your triple trees. So you can see that our turn signals right here are up here on the top triple tree. So that pinch bolt, we don't want to pull all the way out, otherwise that thing's going to crash and burn for us. So now, I'm not a big fan of these Torx fasteners, and certainly on areas where we need a lot of foot pounds, because they have the tendency to strip very, very easily. And one thing I do want to mention, if you are using the same tubes and fork boots, maybe just changing out the triple trees or risers or that setup, when you do pull this off, before you loosen any bolts, mark the top of where your fork tube is. That'll give you a guidance point, reference point of where you originally had it. It'll make it much easier aligning your fork legs up when you're doing the reassembly. So take the time and just make a quick mark on there. Now I'm gonna hold this at the same time. You can see it started moving. I'm gonna turn the wheel so I have area. And then here is our stubborn little bracket. And we're gonna take this guy right out. And while you have these off, make sure you give them a quick clean, quick rub down. All right, we're gonna turn this guy over. We're gonna do the same thing on this side. Top pinch bolt. And when we get to reassembly, it is critical that you do this in a certain pattern. Otherwise, you're gonna have a binding front end and you're gonna have parts failure before you even know it. So that is by far way more critical than the removal side. All right. And these should come out relatively easy. If you do have a side, stay put. If you do have your triple trees getting chromed or even powder coated, these are obviously done by Harley, but sometimes powder coaters or chromers don't take into consideration tolerance or clearances. So you may need to go inside your fork tube entries right here and either run a quick piece of sandpaper through or deburr those and make sure you have the clearance to get them through. So we do that with a lot of our parts. When we build ground ups, our powder coat actually tapes off and masks off, so we don't have to go through that for realignment. So if you're having trouble, point is, that could be why. All right. So now we're going to pull the headlamp off, and let's see where we're going to rest this. We should have a connector for this guy right back here. Actually, we're going to leave the headlamp on. That way we can keep through that one. All right, so now we're going to move to the bars. What I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to take the actual perches off. So we're going to take the clutch perch off and the master cylinder perch, and then also the control housings and the throttle. That grip is glued on. That's an aftermarket one. And that way it's just going to be a little bit easier for us to work with. So first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these cable clamps. These are just puts a little sexiness to it. A little bit more detail. And it helps to make sure your lines aren't binding at all. All right. Sorry, let me show you that. So that's the clamp right there for the clutch, and then we have for our throttle and idle lines. Obviously, if you have a fly-by-wire, you're not going to have those. You're just going to have them directly run through the bar typically. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the top bolt out of our housing. And this is why I disconnected the batteries, because we're working with electrical. Even though we're not pulling any connectors or going through and soldering anything, I just always like to pull that out just in case. So we're not working with any potential issues. All right. Get that loosened up. Cool. All right, now I'm going to take the perch off, master cylinder. I'm working with torque still. It's always tossed me off. A lot of times street glides, road glides, you're going to have Allens up here. I'm working with forks or torques. You can disassemble piece by piece on here as well. But on here, if I'm doing this alone like I am right now, obviously I'm going to pull this top bolt all the way out. And I'll make sure I don't drop anything. It's like a surgeon over here. Look at this. All right. Doesn't help when you're looking at a light and looking black on black here, with a black tip on the Torx. Oh man. Yeah, always, if you're working over the bike like this, it is critical that you have some kind of component down there, a blanket, just to make sure you're not bumping anything. As you can see, I've got brace on everything. This front piece is going to come out. Then we're going to take our perch off. And now we can put our cylinder down, rest assured. Oh, why not? Let's do it. So here's our whole setup. Here's our perch, master cylinder reservoir, our bridge right there, and the actual brake caliper. And like with anything else we've been doing, I'm going to take the front piece that we had on there and just put it right back on. These bolts do mate. All right. Now we're going to get some slack on this side. Yes, you do want to come off. All right, so what we're going to actually do is flip these over. That way we get some more room for that front end. All right, throttle housing, idle lines. Normally we'd take individually these off. In this case, I want to show you that install too. And keep in mind, if you're putting on larger bars, if you're going up in maybe a 6-inch or an 8-inch or even a 10-inch with ape hangers, for your application, make sure you take into consideration the length of your line. So for us, the idle lines, the throttle line, and clutch, brake, all that had to be extended. So that's going to be another component. All right, we're going to do the same thing on this side. Pull off the clutch perch. Keep the lever attached. Almost forgot. Make sure you guys are checking out our Instagram page and sharing your bike on there. You can if you submit a photo of your bike. We definitely try to put it up there, so if you want some exposure, check that out. All right, we're going to take this guy off. I'm going to rest it on this side because I have double blankets. And then I'm going to pop around, and we're going to work up for the bottom. Of course, had to be that one bolt. There it goes. And this is a bike that you can actually run the wires through. You can, if they're not pre-drilled, you can drill them yourself. We did that last month, so it's a nice little feature to clean it up. All right, I'm gonna keep these guys all over here. That would have been fatal. Guess would have got a riot out of that. All right, so now that we have majority of these done, I'm going to get this line loosened. Okay. You know, I'm not comfortable with that. Let's get this over. Okay. All right, so for our triple trees here, what we have, there is a stem that runs all the way through. Either you have a nut on the bottom here that's going to be drove right through with a set screw in the back that makes sure that doesn't work its way out, similar to the pinch bolt on the front fork boots. This one we just have a screw right here on the top and a pinch bolt. So I did crack that pinch bolt loose already, and then we're going to pull off the top. How much time do we have? Do we have enough to go through the bars too? No. All right, so I'm going to leave the bars on. What we have right here is the speedometer, and then our 4 bolts for our riser. So these are the only things holding our handlebars down right now. But if you want to see more in-depth video on this, make sure you check out the videos on our website, fixmyhog.com here. All right. When we reinstall, this is where we're going to get around to the thread locker and what type to use. We juggle through either blue, which is a majority of the time we're using blue just as another preventative, the fastener coming out, or red. And red would be an area that you really don't want ever to come loose unless you're doing a major haul, so that stem bolt would be one that we do it with. All right, so from this point, bottom triple tree. See, I'm a one-man team, so I'm going to try doing this pretty carefully. All right, so top triple tree, bottom triple tree. So our bearing is already installed in here. It's a sealed Timken bearing. You can notice that there's no dust cover. You're just going to take your bottom triple tree. You're going to push it directly through. Stem coming up, top triple tree back on. Work it through. Hand on the bottom. Can you see this pinch bolt right here? My big old eyes bopping at you. All right, so that's the pinch bolt I was talking about with the stem. What we're going to do is we're going to, normally I'd have someone grab some Loctite. I'm going to start this bolt, and we're going to get some Loctite here. So I'm going to use red Loctite on this one, thread locker. This is going to be interesting. Make sure you're watching here, boys. I got it. It's another area where you call that buddy. All right, so I put a dab at the bottom here. See that?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're going to work our way through. Now there's no need to take that entire fastener, whatever fastener you're using, and put thread locker all the way through it. Take it at the tip, and what happens is as you start fastening that and screwing it in, it's going to work its way through those threads and then eventually dry out, causing it to lock in place. So you don't need half a bottle for an axle nut or a stem nut like this. It's not needed. So this is the last time we're going to be using this one. Put that away. Now you notice I left this loose. Reason being is that we need to align those fork tubes back in there. So I'm just going to get this snug to where we still have play and able to move both sides. I'm actually pretty impressed that that didn't go, it wasn't fit.
Feels that good.
Yeah. Let's say that just.
Let's say that.
All right, so. Okay, so that is tight. And you can see we can still move both halves, top triple tree and bottom triple tree here to get those things aligned. Now here's going to be the fun part. So we're going to take this so I can stop kicking this. We're going to take some WD-40. And of course, that was the one thing. I'm going to take a rag and we're going to wipe this thing down before we install. It's going to help, number one, allow it to go in there a little bit easier. And number two, get any of these potential rust spots off. Now make sure you take a look on which ones you're putting on the right side. Yeah, hold on one second. Your brake caliper mounting bolts will need to be obviously on the left side for this bike, so we're going to be putting on the right side. And we're just going to take some WD. That's all we need. Clean it up. And then we're going to slide it right through the bottom. And this is the area where I told you if you made that mark, it'll come in handy right now. And now, don't forget that we had our brackets, so we're going to reinstall these before we slide that all the way through. We're going to move that top triple tree, and I always take a look to make sure all our wires are behind, nothing got pointed up here. And for this, I'm lining up the mark. All right, we're gonna keep that one. Put an extension on here. And then tighten the top snug. Now I'm not gonna torque these down just yet until we get that other side done. Make sure that lines up still, and then we'll torque them to spec. Make sure you reference your manual on that and see what your manufacturer is calling for on these. All right. All right, again, we're going to start at the bottom, work our way through the top. Put that down. Put this guy right back on. Where'd you go? Oh. Come here real quick, would you? Just hold that with your arm. Just so we got it. Cool. Like I said, it's a little difficult with one-man team. So now I'm going to look for our mark, drop it down. Oop. Okay. And keep it snug. Now, since we don't have our triple tree all the way tight, since we've got everything kind of put together right now, this is where I use another person. I have them hold the bottom of the fork boots right here. I loosen these now that we have them in, and then keep them installed like that. And what we'll do is then we'll torque down the top of our stem nut right here, or bolt in this case, and bring those triple trees in. And then we're going to go and then get all the pinch bolts done. Now, the reason for that is that if we actually went through right now and did all the pinch bolts, torqued those down, and then went to the triple tree, we're going to have a binding effect. And vice versa if we were going to do it another way. But what that'll do over time is it's going to wear down your bearings, number one. Number two, it's going to evenly or disevenly wear out your fork tubes and then cause failure down the road. So that's the pattern that you want to go through. Torque down the triple trees, and then from there we'll get to all the pinch bolts and get those torqued down. How much?
You can go over an hour if you want.
Oh, lucky. All right, that's cool. Let's do that. All right, I'm going to use Zach on this one. If we can just, if you can pop over, you in a good view right there. You don't have to show them your face if you don't want to. All right, so we're going to pop these loose again. They're going to move, which is fine. We just want to keep them on both sides. There we go. You can see why it's easier with a helper. All right, now I'm going to take this through. All right. Pull out the torque. Where's our beam? We didn't put that one out, did we? Look at us, unorganized on this one. All right, since we're going to be going right back through this, we're just going to take this one down so it's snug for your reference. I don't want to waste your time on this. All right, so now that we've got that down, we're going to go through, redo our alignment here. Where are we at? All right, down just a tad right there. Huh? Hold on, one more. Yeah, we're good on that side. And then now, finish up on this one. All right. Good. Thank you, sir. And then, now that we have that stem bolt already torqued down, pinch bolts down to spec, we're going to go through, and then there's going to be this last one right here. That's going to go right on the stem. And that's it with your front end, with the forks, I should say. Ready to rock and roll. All right, so since we don't have the fender and all that stuff on, I'm going to actually tighten down this headlamp so we don't have to worry about nicking or grazing anything. There we are. So line this up. Sometimes you have a dowel in here that actually lines it for you. and that's going to be torqued down to spec. And then everything's tightened up. We're good to go there. All right. We're going to get the most important part, other than just getting that torque sequence put together correctly, is going to be putting on that front tire. Now, if you were putting a newer tire on, obviously we've got a little bit wider tire, more of a tougher look on this one. You want to take into effect that you're going to maybe need a spacer for your brake bracket, and pushing that caliper off to meet that wheel. And also the spacing is going to be different. So I'm going to run you through just a typical spacing, one that we do with our front ends. We're going to put the wheel in there, no brake caliper or anything in there. And then we're going to take the axle without any spacers and run that through. Doesn't like my beard? Oh. I don't either. So there's a lot of anti-seize on this. What we're going to be doing is putting our own anti-seize, but I'm going to wipe it off so we don't get all over the bike. By the way, these reflectors, some of you guys already know this, you can just pop these things right off. All it is a 3M adhesive on the other side. So if you don't like the look of those and really want to keep it blacked out, pop those things off. All right, so now we're just going to take this all the way through. Make sure your axle is all the way through. Now what I'm feeling is something binding, so I'm not going to go any further now. I'm good. I'm trying to bang that through. These heavier tires are always fun to work with. All right, and then we're going to space this off. Now, everyone's got a preference and everyone's got their own way of doing this, and I'm going to explain my route of doing this, and been doing this for 15 years, so it's worked for a long time. I don't ever go off the side of the tire to the inside of the fork leg or the boot. Reason being is that you can have uneven wear. The plies could be different on your tire, so what I like to do is I like to take an area on the rim or the hub and make sure that is intact, and if it's brand new, typically the machining job is going to be good, and measure that off to the inside of the fork boot right there. This is good where this is a good place for a straight edge or ruler or anything. And I'm going to eyeball this thing as best as possible. And again, making sure the axle's in there. I'm going to hold this. I'll do it for you on this side first. I'm going to hold this against the fender bracket since that's my straight edge. And then I'm going to go in to right to the top of my rim. Now that's showing 1 1/8. And then I'm going to go right off the inside of this sealed bearing. And that's showing 1 inch exactly. Now I measure this just to make sure the tire is center, and then we'll go down to the axle and measure that. So that's the reason I am doing this. Again, we're going to come on the side of the fender brackets right here. And we've got 1 inch. Okay. And then we're going to take this right in on the inside. And we've got 1 inch. So with that, inch on both sides. Now we're not putting if you're doing a Springer front end, you're going to have to put a bracket off the axle with a linkage to make sure it doesn't spin on you as you're going. If you have an RPM gauge on there for some older models, maybe yes, there's tons of stuff out there that can go on the axle. Make sure that is on there as well when you're spacing this out, because obviously that's going to make your measurements a little bit different. But if you're running just a straight single-sided brake and a single hub, then it's going to be pretty typically easy to measure that out. But make sure you are getting an accurate reading from that outside of that sealed bearing. If for whatever reason you're not using sealed bearings and you're using Timken bearings, make sure that outer seal is pressed all the way in and go on the outside of that Timken bearing inside the seal. If some of you are looking at me in the camera like, what the hell did he just say? I will show you right now. So this is our Timken bearing. It goes into the race like this. It's obviously tapered. And this is the back area that you should be reading off of. It's similar to a fork seal. It's black and circular, but it just seals all that grease in there. So make sure you're reading off that. And if you're looking to rebuild your front end, before I forget, make sure you check out those videos, because that's a big deal to make sure that's done properly with dampeners and all your springs and clips. So, but back on task, front end, spacing that out. Make sure you have all that on there. Make it pretty simple. 3 things: space off just a secured and consistent area on your wheel, and then make sure you've got everything on there, and then triple check your work and make sure that that you're on target. So that's majority of the front end spacing broken down for you. And now, since we've got our measurements already done, we're just going to pull this axle directly out, put these spacers in, and secure our front end. Now I'm going to get anti-seize, and this is another area where people, like we've seen, like to feel like the whole bottle needs to be in use for one time, which it doesn't need to be. And all I'm doing, when we reassemble things, and if they're used parts, as we go through, we always clean them. It's much easier to clean them when you have them like this than trying to get your hand around all these obstacles and brake rotor and caliper. So something we do that makes life a little easier, less headaches. All right, so now I'm going to pop this guy back out. I'm not going to pop this guy back out. Jeez. Well, thank you for working on that one. So what I'm doing on this side that you can't see is that you see those drilled holes right there. I'm putting my T-handle right through, like that. And I'm rocking it back and forth and pulling at the same time. So I literally take it like this, make sure obviously it's not hitting that powder coated boot, and work our way out. This way you don't ruin anything with the axle and don't have to worry about pounding these threads in from the opposite side. So some of those hidden axles nowadays, you see that you don't have any grip or area to help support removing or installing that. So anti-seize, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the area that we're going to be inserting. So it's going to be right here. Just dab it on. And again, just for good measure, toss one in there. Now as we put this through, it's going to work. I like to spin these as we go through so we evenly get that anti-seize out there. And we're going to see if we can do this solo first. So I'm going to take the axle spacer for this side, put it on up. This side, put it on in. Man, things never go this smooth. All right, we got that. Yeah, no kidding. As I'm doing this, again, I'm twisting, I'm turning. And we're just getting bound up here. So I'm going to take the mallet. Now, I don't know if you heard that, but there's 2 different pitches. I'll show you again. We're going to knock it in. That higher pitch is mean, you want to do it one more time? Just because I want to hit it again. That higher pitch means you're bottomed out against that spacer. So this axle has a shoulder on it. bottoming it out, making sure you're fully in there. Boom. Then we're good to go. 3's enough for today. When we get off camera, I'll do it again. And then I'm going to take blue Loctite and put blue Loctite on there. Yeah, where is the box? All right. Oh, okay. What you can do is you actually can tighten the pinch bolt a little bit to help torque this down. We're going to run a little over, guys, just so you guys can get everything on this. Maybe the next hour if this Loctite doesn't come out. Okay. Flat washer. There we go. Take that on there. Again, take a peek at what your manufacturer is calling for torque spec on this. I'm going to take the pinch bolt that we have, reinsert that on this side. I'm going to tighten it down to where it's snug. I believe it was 9/16, and we are 1 over on that. Boy, I'm shooting 100 on this size. Oh, where's our socket? Oh. All right, so we're going to tighten this pinch bolt down. And then torque our axle to spec. Make sure you have your wrench to do that. It's much easier. We put a socket on here. What we'll do is put a socket on here, torque it to spec. I'm just going to get snug for you guys right now. And then once you have your spacers all installed, everything torqued down, I always like to spin the tire to make sure there is no binding. Everything looks good. The rotor is spinning freely, and it's a good chance for you to make sure it's not warped as well. And then also check the lateral movement. Take one from the bottom, one from the top, and push back and forth to see if you have any lateral movement between your tubes. And in fact you do, then you know right off the bat that your spacing isn't on. So with the front end, this is the majority of what it all entails. It's kind of simple if you walk through it like we just did, and piece after piece, and just making sure that you're just taking your time with measurements and torquing things down in sequence. So now what we'll end up doing off camera is reinstalling our uppers. So we'll put on the cylinder, the perch, and then the throttle. We'll move over and put on the clutch, or sorry, the master brake. Then we'll put on the clutch, and then the housings over there. Route the wires to make sure nothing's binding or kinking. And we will go through and put the fender on, and then our detachable front windshield as well. And then, as always that we do, we always go through and double and triple check all the bolts and fasteners and to make sure everything's aligned. So I'm sorry I didn't get to any of your questions. I want to make sure we got into getting this done, but I appreciate you guys tuning in for this month. Make sure you keep checking out the new videos we're putting up on the website, and we'll be back next month with another video. So thanks for tuning in, guys.
There's one question you wanted
What is it?
Let's answer real quick. From Fred.
Yep.